Which language should I learn first? Do you want to know which language you should learn? Well, then definitely stay tuned. All right, hold on. First, subscribe, like, and comment, and definitely don't forget to follow me on Instagram. All right, let's get into this video. This is a question I've gotten countless times, and usually my answer to that question is no answer at all. I'm not gonna lie, whenever I get the question, I'm thinking to myself, how am I gonna tell you what language you should learn? I don't know your motivations, I don't know your interests to determine that. So today I'm coming on here to respond to that question. Instead of asking me what language you should learn, here I am with 5 questions you should ask yourself before learning a new language. The first essential question to ask yourself before deciding on which language you should learn is, why do you want to learn a new language? Or what are your motivations, your reasons behind wanting to learn a specific language or behind being indecisive? So this is the first question you need to ask yourself. What kind of reason do you have? Do you have career reasons? Do you want to change careers? Or maybe you want to have better opportunities? Or maybe you just want to travel? Or maybe you're just interested in a certain culture and the language? Whatever possible reason you have, you should get to know your own motivations behind wanting to learn a language. I can't tell you the reason. I cannot put any reason on you. I can't tell you, well, learn French because that will give you a better career path. Well, I could tell you technically, but this shouldn't be the only motivation and reason behind you wanting to learn something. So you need to find out for yourself, why do you want to learn a new language first? Second essential question you could ask yourself before learning any new language is, what is the most useful language to you personally? As I answered in this video already, what are the 5 most useful languages? Check it out here, on there. I think it's here. So I answered in this video more in detail what are the 5 most useful languages. So for you, you need to answer that for yourself as well. Determining the usefulness of a language is somewhat subjective. So you should also try and find out for yourself what language is most useful to you. And by determining the usefulness, you also determine the motivation and reason to learn it. Another question you could ask yourself in this context, how do you plan on using the new language? Do you plan on using it just for travel purposes? Do you plan on using it for career purposes, like in the first question? Or do you just simply plan on using it because you're moving somewhere? You need to determine how useful the language is going to be for you. And in that video I just mentioned about the 5 most useful languages, I mentioned that because I was seeing in comments people telling me, why don't I learn Russian, or why don't I learn Dutch, or why don't I learn, I don't know, like Polish, because those languages up until now didn't have a personal usefulness to me. Like, I don't have a useful reason to learn those languages because I don't have any kind of relation to those languages, not career-wise, not privately. So that's why there has to be a usefulness to a language for me. I can't just learn a language because it's easy to learn, or because I just have a bunch of free time left, so I'm just learning Dutch. I have to have a reason. That is for me personally, because I think the reason is what drives you, what will motivate you. And if I don't have a reason to learn a language, I don't have the motivation. That's why I usually just learn languages that are useful to me personally. So we could say in this context that Arabic is useful, is one of the most useful languages in the world. Career-wise, yes, it might be useful. But as for me, right now, it is not the most useful. I actually learned it, but up until now, I never used it. So that's why for me personally, the grade of usefulness is not as high as for someone who might actually need it and who might actually use it in their job or in their travels or anything they're doing. So as I said, if you want to know more about how determining the usefulness, then definitely check out my list. Third question you should ask yourself is, what are the closest languages to your language? So, as you might know, languages are grouped in language families, and language families have languages that are closely related to each other. So let's say, for example, Romance languages, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, French, Portuguese. So all of these languages have so many similarities. So of course, once you learn one of those languages, it's going to be way easier to learn the other languages. And that is basically what I personally did. I learned one Romance language after another. That's why it was way easier for me to learn those languages and pick up on them quicker. When I learned Spanish first, I was confident and I was fluent in Spanish. That's when I went on to learn Portuguese, because of course, once you're a native Spanish speaker or near native speaker or fluent speaker, whatever, it's gonna be way easier for you to learn Portuguese because they're so closely related to each other. So you can determine as a native English speaker, for example, which languages belong to the same language family as English. So there are Germanic languages like German, Dutch. Those languages are all closely related to the English language. You could see that also in examples of native English speakers who move here to Germany, for example. They have such an easier time learning German. Usually in just about a year, or like just 6 months to a year, they're almost fluent. And when you compare that to a native Spanish speaker or a native French speaker, they usually have a lot more of a hard time learning German than native English speakers, because the languages are so closely related. So that is one question you could ask yourself. Which language is closest to your native language? And that is a language you could try to learn first and go on to learn another language that is also related. That will definitely give you a kickstart and make things for language learning way easier. Another important question to ask yourself is currently, what resources do you have close to you and available to you, especially? Of course, the most widely spread languages and spoken languages have more resources available. So to learn French or to learn German or to learn Spanish will not be that limited and resource-wise as to learn like other languages that are not as widely spread, as for example, Tree, that is widely spoken in Ghana. Just to find resources to learn that language is quite limited compared to other widely spoken languages. So if someone wanted to learn Tree, they would have a bit of a hard time finding resources in terms of finding dictionaries, finding language courses online, or not even just online. But in general, the resources are a bit limited. Of course, more widely spoken languages, as I said, have way more resources available. So that could be another question you could ask yourself. Which resources do you have available? Also, friends can also count as resources, or family even. As for example, me learning Brazilian Portuguese and not Portuguese from Portugal was basically just of the simple fact that I had more Brazilian resources available. That means I had friends who were Brazilians. I didn't have many friends who were from Portugal. I think, would it be the other way around? Would I have had more friends who were from Portugal? I would have actually opted to learn that kind of Portuguese, but I opted to learn Brazilian Portuguese because I had more resources of Brazilian Portuguese around me. I was more in contact with the culture, I was more in contact with music, I was more in contact with the people. So that gave me that connection and that resources I had available in order to be able to practice with them, because I figured if I would learn Portuguese from Portugal, I would have resources like online, but I wouldn't have, for example, language partners or direct friends to talk to. That's another reason that pushed me to learn Brazilian Portuguese. And you might do the same thing. In terms of learning Spanish, it's the same question. Should I learn Spanish from Spain? Should I learn Spanish from Mexico or any Latin American country? So usually the core of the language is of course the same, just like with the English language, but the accents are gonna vary, and you need to determine what resources you have available. So obviously in the States, due to geographical reasons, more so Latin American Spanish is taught at schools, but here in Europe, it's more the Spanish from Spain. So of course, those are the resources available here. And the resources available in the States might be more resources like book publishers from like Mexico or like with Latin American Spanish. So that is another question you need to ask yourself. And the last question you could ask yourself to determine which language you should learn is simply looking at which languages are widely spoken, which languages are most spoken in the world. So you could determine learning Chinese, learning Spanish, learning English, learning Arabic. So all of these languages are widely spread. And if you just look at the list, you could just determine, based on the list, on which language you want to learn next. That could give you an advantage in terms of you being able to travel to a lot of places in the world and always being able to speak the language. So I covered basically most of the widely spoken languages. That's why wherever I go, I'm never in a place where I don't speak the language. Or at least, well, of course, if I don't speak the local language, then English. But I'm never like in a place where I'm completely lost and I can't communicate. So, of course, that is another question you could consider. But going from question 1 to 5, those are essential questions I ask myself, and those are questions I would strongly advise you to ask yourself as well when deciding on which language you want to learn. All right, I hope you guys liked this video and got something out of it, and thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.